In this episode of the Omega Podcast, we welcome Donald Thompson, CEO and founder of the Diversity Movement, with a sharp focus on strategic leadership and team development. Donald is a trusted voice in driving business growth and innovation. Stay tuned as we dive into his insights and experience.
Welcome to the Omega Podcast with Donald Thompson, the CEO and founder of the Diversity Movement. It is such a pleasure to have you on the Omega Podcast, Donald.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, no, I am super excited about sharing about your accolades, your awards, but most importantly, the work that you do at Diversity Movement and at some of the advisory boards that you sit on. But in total, many of our listeners are interested in learning more about the Diversity Movement. Can you share with our listeners what got you kickstarted in that field?
So one of the things that, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I like to start businesses, new ideas, grow them. And when they get to a certain level, attach them to a larger organization and exit, if you will. One of the things with diversity, equity, inclusion, and the diversity movement in particular is we had a very simple goal. The team that we built is creating a better workplace for all. Now, just because it's a simple goal doesn't mean it's not a big, audacious goal, right? And then the second thing we wanted to do with the diversity movement, we wanted to create products and offerings that very clearly linked the work of building that better workplace to the business case, right? That executives could understand, want to fund, and get excited about. And so as we started our firm in 2020, we got started a little bit before a lot of the catalyst events, George Floyd and different things. But one of the things that we found is there were a lot of DEI, organizational change, culture wellness consultancies. There weren't a lot of folks that took that consulting knowledge and built it into products. For example, we have a micro video platform that has over 600 micro learning pieces of content across a plethora of issues that allow people within our organization to educate themselves in the flow of work. What we found is that people are so busy, time strapped, attention deficit is crazy. But when people have questions, that's when they're the most open-minded about learning because they have something they need to solve. They're going into a one-on-one meeting with a peer. How do I give and receive better feedback? What is a microaggression? How do I sell a new idea to my boss? Now, one wouldn't fundamentally think about this as DEI because of all of the noise that's in motion in our marketplace. But if we think about interacting with one another, human, it's all about how can we balance empathy and economics in our daily interactions with others. And that's kind of a nutshell of why we got started, why we think we're different, and then kind of where we focus.
Yeah, the empathy and economics. And that sometimes plays a significant role in how people are interacting with each other on a day-to-day basis in the workplace. And from 2020 until 2025, the workplace has changed drastically. And there has been change in workplace modalities such as remote work, hybrid modalities, and just companies just refusing to give the option to their constituents to even work from home. They have to work in the office. So with all these different workplace modalities and having the focus on empathy and the economics, what is your approach, or perhaps what's your strategies that C-suite executives should be approaching to really create that type of workplace organizational environment that's promoting those types of conversations?
One of the terms that I use, and it's not just me, but a common term, is when we talk about the term psychological safety. Now, what does that mean in practice, right? Psychological safety in practice means how quickly does your team bring you bad information? Do they try to hide it? Do they try to camouflage it? Do they try to put flowers or lipstick on a pig, so to speak? Or have you created an environment where your team can talk to you about what's working, what's not working, and you partner together to fix it? So how do we eliminate that fear of retribution because some information may not be good? Well, we teach leaders how to pull information from their team by asking better, smarter, more thoughtful questions to create an environment. For example, as a leader, and I talk to my team and I say, team, listen, we've gone through the daily updates. I want to give some space in this status meeting. What am I missing? What are some of the things that you all would like to share with me that might be blind spots? What opportunities might you share with me that I might not understand but need to hear? And I want to just slow down and listen to anything else you all want to share to put a bow on this meeting. That is a way that an executive can create psychological safety, right? When someone's giving you an update and you might not like the information as the leader, you might not like the quality of the presentation. Instead of blowing it up, you can simply say, I still have a couple of questions that the presentation doesn't cover. Can we take a few minutes on some things that I'd like to see in the next version of this document? I've said very clearly that what I saw is not final. I don't love it. I've said very clearly there's a couple things that are missing. What I didn't do was attack the person. What I didn't do was belittle the effort that they put into the document. But I still communicated that there were some things lacking in the standard of excellence I wanted to see, and now I want to partner with you to how to get there. That's very different than some of the harsh, direct, lack of empathetic feedback that people give. And here's what I learned as a leader. A lot of times leaders will say, well, I just want to be a straight shooter with folks and just tell them the truth and be honest with folks. Okay, fine. Except leaders fail to realize that negative comments from your boss create anxiety, fear. Who works productively in anxiety and fear? Not very many people. So in your hope of being direct to make things go faster, you're actually creating less productivity in your team versus taking the 30 seconds, the minute to 2 minutes to create better phrasing, more empathetic language to actually create the motivation that you want.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate how you highlighted the importance of how these leaders are approaching the individuals within their workplace. Because oftentimes we do want the best outcome, the best results. And sometimes having that type of tenacity is not translated well in those day-to-day interactions with your employees. But when it comes to the ability, let's say a leader is really upset with their employee. For instance, in this example, the employee had a specific deliverable. The employee was not able to get it done. And now the client is talking to the owner and saying, hey, you didn't get it done. I'm pulling back. What impact does conflict resolution have on team dynamics and productivity?
One of the things about being empathetic, it doesn't mean not being honest about the situation, right? So let's play that out. Let's just say we missed a deliverable. We've got to talk to the team about it. The client is either not going to pay on time or they may going to go in a different direction. But either way, there's something that negatively impacts the business, right? John, Joanne, I want to explain to you a conversation I just had with the CEO of XYZ.com. They were not happy with our overall productivity, and it's really put the business at risk. So what I want to do is talk about the ways to mitigate it, what we need to do to address it, and if there's going to be any impact within our organization because of it. But I'd love to have this conversation because I need to hear your thoughts because you all are closer to the client than me. But what I want to tell you is this isn't a great situation right now. So we're really going to have to lock hands and figure this out, right? When would you like to meet? When would you be ready to do it? Now, I've not couched the situation. I've not said anything that was not untrue or very, very direct. But what I didn't do, and unfortunately guilty of this, right? I can't believe you all did this way. How can I trust you all ever again if you can't? All these things that are so emotive for me as a leader versus forward looking. And I think we should all hold ourselves to a professional communication standard that we can say what we need to, say it with the force that is required, but do it in a way that uplifts people, even if there's a negative outcome because of this miss, right? I don't need to take your self-image. I don't need to damage you as a human. I just need to get this work done. And so I need to know as a business leader, did you drop the ball? Did I not give you the resources you need to meet this target? Was there something missing that I as a manager or the organization didn't do? And then what is your individual responsibility as a team member to deliver on your promises, right? And so I think that teaching leaders how to have those higher end communication skills actually creates more synergy within the organization.
Yeah, the whole fact that leaders should be taking responsibility for the start to finish of these particular engagements and being able to have that self-assessment. And you shared in your recent response, Donald, the importance of blind spots. Blind spots is something that a lot of industry leaders don't necessarily take the opportunity to learn about, such as confirmation bias, halo and horns effect, prototype bias, similarity effect. This is something that I teach to some of the constituents within Omega Consulting and how that should be utilized, as well as the different types of heuristics, cognitive shortcuts. I think those are so crucial because not only is it giving every single person at the table the opportunity to recognize their own biases, but they're able to listen better. They're able to actively listen more productively. But when we're talking about the modern day workplace, it's changing. Things are rapidly being disrupted. They're talking about workplaces being a hybrid of AI, bots, and humans. How can talent strategy and acquisition practices be improved to foster this inclusive workplace that we're all looking to strive?
So one of the things that I was talking to a CEO that I coach this morning, actually, and we were talking about how to build your team for the new economy. And so a couple of thoughts, right? Number one, you're looking for folks that have multiple skill sets that could be deployed within the business. I get specialization, but the world is moving so fast. You want people that have multiple skill sets that gives you most flexibility as a leader, number one. And two, a critical component in hiring these days is your learning capacity. See, it's not what you know and what you've done, yes, but there's a lot of talented people that have done a lot of smart things. How fast can you learn and apply new knowledge, new information, pivot into new circumstances? And the second thing is how resilient have you shown yourself to be as a team member over the last few years? So when I'm interviewing and looking at building new teams, right, I'm looking for those kind of characteristics in addition to the traditional hard skills, human skills, all those things. Resiliency matters because we're in an ever-changing workplace. And then that multiple skill set is also business critical because when you talk about the balance between AI, humans, bots, right, that's a new psychological model for work. All right. So that means you have to have people on your team that are willing to chase the future, that are not holding on to the past. Right. And so it's a mental model that we're looking for. And the final thought I would share, and when you're looking at inclusive hiring and different things of that nature, let's just make sure that the interview process within our organizations has a diverse feel to it, right? We think about it in terms of cross-functional teams, right? So somebody from marketing, somebody from sales, somebody from technology, all that's fine, makes sense. But you also have different personalities, different generations in your organization. Make sure that the folks that are talking to your new team members have the elements of diversity that you have in your organization, right? A lot of times people think of diversity, DEI, as a sexual orientation or a black and white thing, right? It's so much deeper, so much more robust than that, right? And so it's really kind of silly to try to put something so large into a small box. It just doesn't make sense. And so what I think about in terms of hiring in the team, I want to be a part of businesses where I can see myself. And if I don't see a broad array of people that I'm being introduced to in the process, it's harder for me to see myself.
Absolutely. Representation in these types of work environments do matter, especially when it comes to working up that corporate hierarchy. But when it comes to the ability to have that self-assessment, when we talk about our personal superpowers, you shared how throughout the process for hiring, they should be able to have conversations with individuals at different departments. But each department has specific criteria. They're looking for a specific individual that has set expertise. And sometimes that may or may not backfire, especially when it comes to getting to the actual hiring process. How can an individual, let's say applying to a company, have the best approach to recognizing their superpower, perhaps acknowledging their kryptonite or their weaknesses in this instance, and being able to have the practical ways to improve in those areas?
So if you're an employee looking to join an organization and develop your professional career kind of progress, I like case studies. So it's not just the skills you have. How did you apply those skills in a particular situation? That can be done in a cover letter. That can be done as a quick little blurb underneath resume bullets. But I like actual examples of how you applied the skills that we need, number one. Number two, I think it's super important to describe to any new team member that you're trying to be a part of an organization how you dealt with failure in the past. What did you do to overcome it, right? Because no one believes that everyone's career takes this straight line trajectory to the top, right? We've all had ups and downs, curveballs that have been thrown. That's not an issue. The key is how do we address those things? And then the third element I'm looking for in any kind of candidate that's looking to rise is talk to me about your communication skills across different stakeholders within organizations. How do you communicate above when people have hierarchical authority? How do you work with peers? How do you communicate with team members, right, that you're charged with leading? That conversation about your communication skills across those different stakeholders really tells me a lot about the way somebody's going to work.
For sure. And I can, from individuals that I have spoken to within my own organization, the oldest person out of Mega Consulting is 72 years old, and the youngest person, an intern, is 21 years old. So you have close to a 50-year gap here. So having conversations that is relatable to both of those types of age groups is beyond me. But one thing I really appreciate you mentioning, and the reason why I provided that question earlier is I think when you are part of the C-suite, you have 20 to 30 year track where you have been given feedback. You have been given, I would say you've gone through the ringer and you have better assessment of yourself. But for someone who's stepping into these new organizational structures or into these associate roles, they don't necessarily have a holistic approach to what they're good at, what they're bad at. They're still learning new skills. So with that same question being paired, how do you believe leadership within the C-suite can be more cognitive of what's happening within their workplace environment? Because more times than not, when you're at the top, you don't necessarily hear all the rumbling underneath, right? You don't necessarily hear it as much unless someone is bringing it to your attention. How do company leaders begin to be more aware as to what's happening? Is it having those conversations? Is it kind of maybe putting down their boundaries or barriers for a moment just to listen to some of their employees? I mean, what is one way that they can engage with their employees in order to have a better outcome?
Enjoying this episode of the Omega Podcast? We want to hear from you. Please share your thoughts or feedback in the comments. You can also visit Omega Consulting online for more resources, insights, and industry updates. Let's get back to the executive conversation.
So I'll give a couple examples, and it's a good question, because when you've been in the C-suite, like you stated for a while, it's its own form of a bubble, right? And what you want to do is talk to your newest people and the folks that are closest to the client. So a couple ways. Number one, within organizations, I think it's important to have opportunities for more junior people to pitch you what they're doing, why it matters, and how you can help, right? So you can set up some of those within the organization, independent of your size, right? Now, if you're a 10,000, 50,000 company, probably more difficult, but I'm really talking an SMB and enterprise. You can have folks at different points in the organization, right, pitch you their ideas. The second thing that is really, really critical, right, is what is the information you're pushing out to the employees and the openness to ongoing questions and feedback. So when you're having your town halls, when you're pushing out information in your weekly report or your monthly note to your team, start seeking information in a very specific way, and then reward those questions or comments that you do get and read that you're actioning on. So if you read feedback from an employee survey on your executive team, talk about in the next company meeting what you learned, what the team has changed from it, number one. Number two, and I think this is really important, especially for your emerging leaders within your organization, which is typically the most important thing on the CEO's mind. I think that business leaders in the C-suite need to be teachers as well as leaders. And that means setting up mini cohorts in your organization and making sure that the mission, the values, the objectives that you are sharing with your direct reports are also being highlighted 2 and 3 levels within the organization. You can do this with virtual updates with 10, 20, 30, 40 folks on the line that have been identified from different departments, right? You can do this through the survey engine and feedback through letters from the CEO. But what I would say is be very, very structured and focused on how you're going to create powerful and positive points of interaction with people at all levels in the organization. It feels like it takes more time, but your high performers want to understand that they're in business and led by a CEO that they know, like, and trust. So you got to give them an opportunity to know you, and then they can get to like you and trust you. And even if they don't like you, if they know you and trust you, that works too, right? Because we're not going to get along personally with everybody we work for and work with. But if we know them and we trust their motives, we trust their intent, we trust they're looking out for the organization and the people within it, then the small personality differences aren't that big a deal.
Yeah. Well, someone told me earlier on when I started this endeavor to not focus so much on what people think about you, focus on the results. And it's very interesting because as we have been in fruition now for over 5+ years, I have to take a step back and really process that comment, because there really is a hybrid between the two that really crosses over from time to time. Because if people don't trust you, then they're not going to work with you. But if people like you, sometimes people take advantage of the fact that you're approachable, and then they don't do the work. So it's really this duality that you kind of have to play, where you kind of have to be strict, get things done, right? Because it's the bottom line that matters most. But then you also have to kind of be soft and flexible and, approachable, because you want to be able to engage to get that feedback. But it's almost as if CEOs should be given some sort of handbook. And I saw that you came out with the Inclusive Leadership Handbook. Can you share with our listeners a bit more about that book and how that can assist them?
I really appreciate the space to talk about it. One of the things that I find in business is that companies are really trying to find, and leaders in particular, that balance between empathy and economics. And we talked about this earlier. The Inclusive Leadership Handbook gives you some very spot on fundamental things you can do to achieve that balance. It talks about better ways to think about running your meetings. It talks about very specific language things that you can think about in terms of approaching your team, how you can goal set and game plan with your up and coming leaders. So it is the reason we called it a handbook versus a book is we want it to be something that is a day-to-day working guide that leaders can use to tweak their skills within their leadership personality. Our goal is not to change your leadership personality. Our goal with the handbook is to give you some ways of thinking that can enhance the leadership personality that you want to display in your organization.
Perfect. Now, I know leaders always need resources. We're always learning. We're always adapting. We're always dealing with navigating change management. And as we look toward the future with everything happening regarding tariffs, regarding globalization, regarding digitalization and AI, and all of these different disruptors that are happening within the day-to-day business, how do you see business leaders approaching this change in a holistic way to get onto the other side? Like, is there a specific quality that these leaders need to attain in order to get forward?
So there's certain things you have to do now to keep your day-to-day operations running and humming, right? The AI technology, for example, is not changing so fast, right, that we need to make allergic changes to who we are and what we're doing. But we need to make thoughtful and pace-driven changes. So I encourage leaders, AI example, to start using the tools themselves, right? Start understanding the basics of prompt engineering. Start understanding the differences between some of the different AI tools, the vocabulary. What is a language learning model, right? What is the difference between Claude and ChatGPT? You don't have to become an expert. You just have to become conversational. And then what you'll find is within your organization, as you start to use and play with these tools, you're going to start asking better questions of your team. What makes sense about artificial intelligence for our business as a marketing firm, for our business as a consulting firm, for our business as a development organization? Then as you start having these conversations, you work within your team to now, how do we now adopt these changes? One of the things with new technologies, people get excited about what they can do. Makes sense. The most important thing, though, before you're going to get any productivity is, what is the way that your team is actually going to adopt new technology? It's not just what the technology can do. It's how are you going to gain the business value from the technology in the business that you're in and the competency that you have in your team to try and develop and adopt new things.
Right. The business value, because it is the bottom line. And a lot of companies that don't have a strategic approach or an objective to how they're going to leverage this technology end up getting into more technical debt. And that's a concern that a lot of companies are not aware about because they think, hey, it's flashy, it's going to help us in optimizing our productivity, but they don't realize that the financial repercussions of that is that there should be some business value. There should be a profit increase in your bottom line. That is direct alignment to you investing into these AI technologies. But with the use of AI, it's increasingly adding this additional layer of cybersecurity, transparency, as well as, for some organizations, the inability to use AI because it's so new. Companies around the globe on an international market have been having a difficulty with the current discussion of tariffs, especially under the Trump administration. There has been continual conversation as to how these particular tariffs are going to impact global trade, supply chain metrics, as well as the ability for end consumers like you and I to be able to afford labor, costs, etc. With this type of disruptor, what is your perspective to how business leaders can kind of get their head above water amidst all of this, I would consider distractions when it comes to just your day-to-day business interactions?
Yeah, I think the way, and this isn't political, this is factual, the way that the Trump administration has deployed their tariff strategy has been dysfunctional at best and destructive at worst. When you win an election, you're in charge. You can promote, deliver against the policies that you believe in. And I'm all for that, even if I strongly disagree with someone's approach, right? But what we expect from leadership at the highest levels in our companies, the highest levels in our government, is solid communication and an execution strategy that can be explained, right? And what we're seeing today, and I'll get to answer your question in a minute, is a knee-jerk reaction and a daily set of new points of turmoil. And that's what is really challenging to our markets. That's really challenging to businesses that know anything else other than we're going to pull back. I have many customers and friends and clients that their largest customers are just putting things on pause until they figure out what's going on with the tariffs. So unfortunately, Keenan, I don't have the answer to how to deal with this crazy, right? Like, because it is so dysfunctional. So what you have to do, the best you can do, is say, all right, wait a minute. Given what we know, what are changes that we can make within our existing infrastructure from a cost basis, a marketing basis, a communication basis, and let's make those changes. How do we prepare our team for some of the negative impacts that may occur, right, to our business? And we need to start having those conversations so that we have options A, B, and C as we kind of fare ferret out what's actually going to happen. But it is one of the really toughest economic environments that I've built businesses into, sold into, because there's no predictability to it. And that, unfortunately, is a byproduct of who we elected as president of the United States. And it's affecting the global economy. And again, people vote for Trump, not vote for Trump, for the administration, not. That's not even the conversation. The conversation is the way that things are being done does not create a clear path for business leaders to make clear decisions. That means everything that we're doing is reactive. One of the things that we've seen, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but job anxiety numbers, right, are higher than they've been in the last 10, 15 years. So we are injecting not only confusion into the economic environment from a stock market standpoint, but we're injecting craziness, confusion into the workplace of every single company that's out there. So this is more like COVID than any other economic thing we face. When we had the mortgage crisis in the early 2000s, we knew what sector. When the automobile, the big three were in trouble, we knew it was in automotive. We now are in a global tsunami of noise, right? And everybody's affected because we're all consumers. Everybody's affected because we're all workers. And it is not something that is hitting a specific industry, which makes it a little bit more challenging. I wish I had an answer, and if you find one, tell me. But it's confusing out there.
No, it's definitely confusing. And more importantly, it's almost as if that board of directors need to cut through the noise and really get through the importance of making strategic decisions in the midst of this ongoing change. And I like how in your response, you mentioned how a lot of leaders are reactive than being proactive. And it's not necessarily that they are waiting to make a decision. It's more of them trying to see what's happening within the market in order for them to make a decision that's going to help and benefit their business. That's but right. It's really challenging to do that when you don't have all of the data points together in order to make a justifiable decision that's not going to impact your business in the long run. As we reach the conclusion of our conversation, I have to ask, because there's so much happening, and I don't want to leave our listeners without any hope. I want to leave them with a good perspective for what they need to do as next steps in order for them to really protect their business, protect their assets, and protect their people from what will come. What are ways that business leaders, C-suite executives can really leverage to create a positive company culture in the midst of change, in the midst of the noise, in the midst of distractions? How can they cut through the noise, Donald, and what's their path forward to developing these workplace cultures?
Yeah, my final thought, a couple things on that, and thank you so much for the question and the time to be with you and your listeners today. I think that all leaders across industries should be working on their personal brand. And let me tell you why I believe this. Ultimately, in the age of AI, in the age of transformation, all the things, people buy from people they trust and respect. And so we have to help leaders within their organizations outwardly promote their area of expertise, why they're thought leaders in a specific space, why they can help predict the path forward in their arena. And that allows to cut through the noise, because I, as a consumer, I want to buy from people that have the expertise required to give me a more predictable outcome. As a business leader, you have to share that information about you, your organization, your leadership team. So when someone is searching and trying to determine who to work with from a consulting standpoint, a marketing standpoint, a development standpoint, whatever business you're in, the highest frequented pages on any website are usually the about page, and people want to get to know who the team is that's leading the business. If when they're on that page, they also can click through to thought leadership pieces, to articles, to TV appearances, where that leader is sharing in a more specific way their thoughts and the actions that can be developed in a profitable way from their thoughts, now all of a sudden I am more likely as a consumer, a partner, an investor to be in business with that person. So building your personal brand as a CEO, building your personal brand as a chief revenue officer creates a halo effect with the company that you work for and the larger corporate brand that you represent. So I think a way to cut through the noise is make sure you're developing and growing your thought leadership perspective.
Fantastic. Are there any final thoughts that you would like to leave our listeners with, Donald?
One final thought. AI is only scary to folks that are not leaning into it. So be one of the teams, be one of the individuals that's leaning into the new technology, learning about it. So you're thinking about all of the productivities you can have, not all of the fears that it can create. And so that's the thing that I'm telling all business owners that I talk to is lean into AI so you're making a purposeful decision about how AI can benefit you and your organization versus AI happening to you and feeling more like a victim. So let's chase the value in the new technology versus the fear, uncertainty, and doubt of it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Donald, for being on the Omega Podcast.